Hello, friends. Just your friendly neighborhood Data here, and today I'd like to continue talking about this year's 2022 Midwest Preparedness Project Fall Festival. Now, I've been a part of this thing for over a decade, and let me tell you guys, this one was our best one yet. Our main speaker this year was my new friend, Matt Kleopfer of Harmony Hill Farmstead down in Fredonia, Kansas, and man, let me tell you what an awesome and relevant story he has. So Matt gave a class on Homestead Butchery, and he touched on all sorts of topics ranging from farming to homeschooling to how to farmstead on a budget and butchering livestock and so much more. So my favorite part was when he was talking about how he was voted for as Educator of the Year, and then he decided to turn around and homeschool his kids and why he decided to do it. So anyways, without further ado, here's Matt Kleopfer of Harmony Hill Farmstead.
Hey folks, thank you guys for having me. It is a pleasure to be here. My name is Matt Kleopfer from Fredonia, Kansas, and we're just going to talk through some butchery stuff. I know Matt just gave a beautiful how-to dispatch, clean up an animal right here. So what I'd like to do, kind of gauge the crowd. Is there any newcomers first time here?
Don't be shy.
Good for you. Good for you. I'll just kind of give my brief background and why I'm here today. I was a small town farm kid from Fairview, Kansas, and I had no ambition to stay on the farm. I left and actually went to Washburn, just right up the road here, to go be a musician. Now, I was trading in my pitchfork for a tuning fork. I was going to be touring the world, being a professional trumpet player. I had no ambition to do anything with the farm, but it still had a hold of me. As I was going to school amidst a crowd of pretty artsy people, I would show up to music rehearsal with camo and blood on my jeans from wanting to go hunting and fishing, and the rest of the people in the orchestra would just look at me with this scowl, of detest, and I could sense that, and I was all right with that. But they would always come to me with very practical, real-world questions. So I consider myself a very well-rounded person, having friends on all sides of the spectrum of humanity. I started to teach government school, taught in a small town, Iola, Kansas, not far from here, and spent some time in the trenches in our education system, and God gave me a huge wake-up call several years ago, and he said, this time has passed. I need you to quit your job. I need you to learn how to grow food again. And the uniqueness to this was because I had left the farm, I did not spend much time in conventional industrial agriculture. That was kind of where my dad and brother were at. I had no connection to that. So where I delved in was the health of both of my wife and I's families was going downhill rapidly. Chronic disease was poking its ugly head into our family life. Medical bills and all these other things were looming in, and we were trying to find answers of how did we get to this point. And God revealed to me several things. It was like, it's all starting with the food you're eating. And that was where we made major changes. I remember the first day after this revelation. I was still teaching school at this time. I was at the height of my career. I just won Kansas Teacher of the Year. I mean, my career was going. Things were great. God was like, nah. I walked into my superintendent's office and said, I'm quitting my job. He's like, what? Why now?
You can't quit on me now.
You can't quit on me now. He goes, well, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to go home and start a farm. And you can imagine, especially the thought going through my wife's head, I said, honey, we're going to start a farm. We're going to start homeschooling our kids. And she's like, what? What? And it was not an easy change to make it that quickly. It was not an easy change to reach into our pantry and grab out all the industrial food and chuck it in the trash and learn how to eat again. Learn how to prepare and farm again when everybody's looking at you with this eye of, what are you doing, you fool? Why are you not doing it like the rest of us? So if there's anything that I can do as a support, I want to tell you not to be scared when people are looking at you like you're crazy, and just continue to do it, because the longer you do it, They will stand there and look at you from a distance. And they might even be pointing and saying stuff at you and ridiculing you. But there will come a time when they come up to you and go, "Can you show me how to do that?"
Amen.
You just give it time and have some faith in the process of what you're doing. Because that's what happened. As soon as my wife and I changed our diet, how we ate, our health started to transform. And those members of the family on both sides that really shunned us for homeschooling. You're going to raise weird kids. They're going to be unsocialized. They're not going to have all the opportunities. Oh, I saw the opportunities as a government school teacher. Believe me, I saw those opportunities. I'm doing this on purpose because I don't want those opportunities. But you can't tell them that. You have to be patient. Wait for them to ask the questions. And then when they do, you just put your arm around them. Forgive them for the things they said and did against you. Love on them. Take them in, feed them dinner, and have those conversations. That's what matters. So on our family farm, I still grew up when farms were fairly diverse, before they went into the age of specialization. I remember grandfather's farm as a young kid. There were an orchard. I watched both my great-grandmas garden well into their 90s. They were extremely self-sufficient. There were family butcheries that happened on our farm back in the 80s. But as the 90s and 2000s, as industrial agriculture sunk its teeth and nailed the final nail in the coffin into our country and sealed the deal into where we're at today, boy, what a great time to be alive, huh? My ancestry left behind for me, and some of them I never even got to know. They died before I was born. Left for me the things, almost knowingly, that I would need today to pass on the traditions to my kids and to their kids that aren't born yet, a tradition that came down through us. Because I'm here to tell you, folks, how we're living today, how our relationship is with food, is the most unnatural thing in human history for thousands of years that we've ever seen. How our bodies are trying to thrive in this extremely unnatural environment is remarkable. I'll just tell you. My father, after I embarked down this homesteading journey, called me one day and he goes, "I have a book you need to have. I stumbled upon it. This is from your great-grandfather's basement. And as soon as I saw it, I knew it needed to be yours." Back in the early 1920s, the USDA, our favorite four-letter acronym, used to send farmers booklets teaching them how to farm. This was long before they were extremely corrupt. And this book my great-grandfather compiled had these little pamphlets. Starting in 1918 was when the first one was issued. And it has everything from how to butcher a pig to how to build a dairy barn, how to build a ventilated chicken house, how to treat diseases naturally before penicillin and tetracycline were used for almost everything. All the modern amenities, before they were around today, this book was made. And I'll never forget, I opened up the first one. This one was issued in 1921, February of 1921. My great-grandfather would have been a young man about my age. It says, "Pork on the farm, killing, curing, and canning." So I decided, okay, honey, we're gonna do this. We're gonna have pigs. We're gonna raise our own food. And I wanted it really bad. And what I was willing to endure to have my first homestead pig experience was this. We were on a budget. I lived on a teaching salary. My wife has a much better paying job than I in the medical profession. And we got 4 piglets. I had no tractor. I had no feed grinder. Our resource for having to grind the feed, I wanted to source local grain from local farmers. And I bought a 1930-some McCormick Deering burr mill that was to be driven with a belt from the pulley of a tractor, except I had no tractor, so I repurposed a John Deere garden tiller and started that baby up, and I would lean into that every morning for 45 minutes to grind that feed, and man, was it a slow, agonizing process. But I learned so much in that very first year of producing my own food. What an incredible journey that was 6 years ago. Now I'm living the Ritz-Carlton farm life. I've got a tractor, I've got my grandfather's feed grinder, and I can grind a ton of feed in about 20 minutes.
Yep.
But I cut my teeth on a very uncomfortable way of trying to raise your own food. And after the pigs had grown, I went back to great-grandfather's book of how to kill and seal the deal on making this from a living thing into food. And I was immediately taken back by how secular we've turned the process of butchery. If you go to one of these industrial butchering machines, I wrote a post yesterday that said, before we had to start medicating your child to exist in a very unnatural, Wi-Fi stricken cement LED light environment, we first had to medicate the food that your kid ate to exist in a very unnatural, confined environment. First we did it to our food, and then it happened to us. You are what you eat, right?
Yes.
We are confined humans in today's societal standards because that's the way our food is grown. And that was the last thing I wanted for my kids. I wanted to set them free. And in order to do that, it couldn't just come from homeschooling. I can't just homeschool them and feed them industrial food. I can't do that. It's all or nothing. Either you unplug from the medical system, the educational system, the food system, or you stay in all of it, because if you don't pull the plug from one of them, you're going to be a slave to one of those systems, period. So I went through this book that I could still see grandfather's sweat. The pages were rolled because I knew he had consulted this book some 100 years ago. And how they butchered meat back then was way different than what I was used to. Killing, curing, canning. This was before modern refrigeration, and there was a lot to learn. And my hat's off to Matt, by the way, for giving a truly awesome hands-on experience for that. I'm glad you guys got to see that and experience that. Is there anybody here who has not pulled the trigger on an animal of their own yet? Raise your hand. Most of you have? Okay. I've gone deer hunting. Killing a deer at 150 yards is a very different experience than cocking back the hammer and taking the life of a pig at 1 yard. When I set the crosshairs of a scope on a good buck one year, I had that buck fever, my heart was pounding, but it was nothing compared to the heart pound I had of standing over the head of an animal that I had raised myself and wanting to make sure that I gave that shot all the time in the world and the justice it needed and the patience it needed to make sure I only shot the animal once. Because there's nothing worse, those of you that have done this, and if you have missed, you know, there is nothing worse than starting off the day of butchery with 2 gunshots instead of 1. So I want to take a second to kind of talk through that part of it, and I don't know if Matt touched on this. For me, there are 2 main tools I use for this. This is an old Winchester long rifle 22. I like this when there's a fence involved and there's a bit of reaching just in case. If I need to get a little bit closer and that animal's head is not perfectly stationary, this offers me a little bit more stability. But most of my animals I raise, I don't necessarily go out and do much butchering for other people. I know that animal really well. They're very comfortable around me. I don't really have to use this much. If you have animals that definitely have a much thicker forehead, like various breeds of pigs, I would offer you the Heritage. This is a cheaper, modern pistol that has cylinders for both long rifle and 22 Magnum. The 22 Mag is a little bit more insurance just in case. If that skull is just a little bit thicker and this is not going to do the trick. I had a Duroc one year that was crossbred with Cooney Cooney, and I did not get a really great square shot on it, and that animal got back up on its feet and needed one more time. Luckily, we were quick about it. We got the animal on its side. Everything was all right. I did learn a couple nice tricks about this, and we're going to mainly talk about pork. If you have another person there with you that can keep that animal on its side, because they're going to thrash and legs are going to be flying everywhere, keep that animal on its side as best you can. Don't keep your knife out of the holster if you can. After you make the shot, they're over. You have about 15 seconds at the maximum to get that knife in and get that double cut to get the bleeding started. And then once you do that, if you can get a mediocre shot and a great stick, you're off to the races. But if you get a mediocre shot and a mediocre stick, you can have some revisits from whatever animal you tried to dispatch. And I just want to encourage you to take all the time. And if taking that shot takes 6 to 10 minutes, then let it. Don't be in a rush for that part. It is not worth it. If I can't stress that enough, take all the time. Once the animal's down and it's finished, hang it up and have a great rest of the day. So, in the rest of Grandfather's book, when you go to a conventional meat shop or in your G&W grocery store and they're cutting conventional meat a certain way, and that isn't necessarily the road I'd like to go down, because I believe not only does butchery need an overhaul, but the way that we're taking the meat and consuming it and the cookery methods involved needs an overhaul. Well, I'm super pumped to see a whole animal over an open fire. How many of you do that at least yearly when you're not here at home? Just kill an animal, hang it on a fire. One guy, okay. I don't know how much longer we're gonna have the modern amenities we have right now. I'm not gonna lie to you, I brought some pretty primitive equipment. If you go back to my house, I've got a meat bandsaw, I've got a really nice big meat grinder, I've got an electric sausage stuffer with a foot pedal. I'm gonna use it for however long I'm gonna get to be able to, but I'm really not sure how much longer that's gonna be. This is the stuff that I started on. This was great-grandfather's sausage press that Enterprise made back in the late 1800s that my father found buried under a foot of soil in the garage. We tore the garage down, we unearthed it, ground the rust off of it, I seasoned it, painted it, and we put this sucker back in commission to make bratwurst again. And let me tell you, the salt and sweat that got put on to make those bratwursts, you don't know how good those bratwursts tasted knowing that I made this with the same press that my great-grandfather did. There was so much satisfaction in that first group of bratwursts. And as unperfect as they may have been, it was a sweet, sweet day. I want to encourage you, if you have any equipment that was in your family, use it again. It'll have a different purpose and meaning for what it is you're doing. Very, very important. And make sure, I remember my wife and I, the first kind of while we journeyed down this road, how much my kids were into helping. Like I just had to kind of give them the reins a little bit, like, hey, just stand back, back. My daughter, where's Kennedy at? Walking the dog. I've never seen a 6-year-old so pumped for Butchery Day. My oldest daughter, Camden, she took on chickens. One season, she raised 800 meat birds. We butchered them in the backyard, and she was up with me at 4 a.m. lighting the fire to get ready for Chicken Butchering Day. We do several hundred at a time to pack the freezers. Kennedy, she loves to do pigs. She would help me raise the pigs. That was her thing to butcher. My son, Carson, he helped me with beef. That was his thing. We'd sell the beef. That was kind of his thing. And then my youngest son, Cortland, he was the sheep guy. So we got to butcher all those animals in the backyard, and the kids had a knife in their hand and they were helping. I encourage you, if you got kids, grandkids, your nephews, nieces, get them over there and show them how to do this, because I taught government school for a while and kids are not being shown how to do this. And it's, I don't know, one of the most basic parts of human survival up until this point, where humans have never known how to do this. Like, I can't think of a different time in human history where humans don't know how to kill and prepare their own food anymore. Like,
Life skills.
if I was a principal at a school, I'd overhaul that sucker real quick. There would be butchery classes again, but I don't own my own government school, so we'll go on from there. So let's talk about what ifs for a second. If we don't have refrigeration much longer, the one thing that I would encourage everybody to make sure that they have on hand is salt. It is one of the things, 100 pounds of salt will cure 2,000 pounds of meat. That bacon right there was cured 5 years ago. It'll be here till Jesus goes ahead and comes back. It's not going bad. The first day that I came upstairs with some pork that I had cured in the basement, hung it in the rafters, down in the basement, brought it up and hung it in the kitchen, my wife was like, I've been on board with all this stuff, I'm not ready for that yet. She was not ready for the sides of bacon and lanzas and lomos and other parts of charcuterie to be hung in the kitchen, open, no refrigeration. We'd have people over and they'd be like, what is that? Oh, it's something, it's some raw pork. And the kids would be like, yeah, you want some? They'd hack some off and uncooked and take a big old bite of it. You want some? No, they're not ready for that yet. My kids, meanwhile, boy, they'd offer, the mailman would come up with packages and they'd be out there on the porch just eating on a raw pork loin, just. And it, you know, those of you friends in the USDA, they go, if you don't cook that at 145 degrees, you'll die of everything now. It'll all hit you at once. So, yes, sir. Sure. Yeah, to try to stay away from the iodized salt. We bought it was 50-pound sack of Redmond sea salt, and they came in plastic bags. It was kind of expensive, $85. Anyway, that stuff has been awesome. The finer the granular, generally the better. If you go to cure some bacon with the thicker sea salt stuff, you can buy it at your local grocery store. It just doesn't dissolve real well, so the finer grains tends to get in the various crevices and cracks of the meat a little bit better. And we'll talk about curing in just a second. Does that kind of help get you along the lines? Yeah. Fine grained, non-iodized salt. Try to have at least, in a preparedness mindset, at least 20 pounds. That'll get you a long ways into a bad situation, which every day that goes by, I'm like, oh baby, we're one day closer to that situation. Like it. No iodine, why is that? It just changes the bacterial makeup of the meat. It's sort of an antiseptic property on the bacteria. So for curing anyway, water is the agent of spoilage. And all salt is doing is immobilizing that water out of the muscle. And once the saturation of water in the muscle goes down past a certain point, these bacteria can no longer proliferate. So your existence of bacteria such as Clostridium botulinum and others that cause some pretty promiscuous and super smelly spoilage on your meat, that environment is no longer favorable for them to exist, both on the surface of and on the inner side of the muscle. Now, if you're going to go something, I'll just go ahead and go down the curing route for a little bit. If you're going to go ahead and try to cure a ham, and you've got a leg bone involved where there are, like a knee joint or a hip joint, where there is a place where there's synovial fluid still present in there, or a place where there's anaerobic or no oxygen involved, closed off environment, you can have a ham go bad and over salt it. Do I have any bacon lovers in here? Okay. All right. So let's talk bacon for a minute. The old timers would use this equation for fermentation, curing, butchery, all these things, and it was always 2% by weight. If you're going to make great sauerkraut or you're going to make great bacon, you're going to use the 2% rule. So if you have 100 pounds of cabbage, you're only going to need 2 pounds of salt to ferment all that cabbage into sauerkraut. 2% is enough to extract enough, mobilize enough water out of that to pull a brine in some cabbage, start that fermentation naturally with the natural lactobacillus bacteria in the air. You're going to make some great kimchi, whatever you want to do. As for bacon, the same rule applies that if we as humans go, well, if 2% of the salt's good, and that's going to keep me kind of safe, then what's 4 going to hurt? And I'll tell you what 4 is going to hurt. You're going to oversalt your bacon and it's not going to be very good, because that's exactly what I did my first time. I put some salt on, I did the 2%, I was like, this just doesn't, gosh, I think we all are going to have this urge to oversalt. And what I want to encourage you, especially when it's your own animal and you put in all the time and you've done all the butchery, you're trying to find that line of going down and using just barely enough salt to get yourself across the line to let the natural molds and bacteria give it those awesome, super cool, nutty flavors that make the meat super unique. And it's nothing you can buy in a grocery store. You cannot have this meat eating experience with any of the industrial. You can't go buy an industrial animal and cure it and have this experience, mainly because in the industrial setting there are additives used in the feed, one of which is called ractopamine. It's an anabolic steroid, the equivalent to what bodybuilders use, that makes lean muscle mass production super efficient on the same base of calories. So if you add ractopamine into a pig's diet and you feed it the same feed ration, it will actually put on more lean muscle mass than it would without it. And we're the only country that hasn't outlawed it yet. You go over to Europe, can't do it. You go to China, they don't even let their producers over there do it. Soy is a great protein. I like soy, it's cool, but it's different than pea protein. It changes the texture of the meat. Soy has a lot of oil in it. If you're going to cure meat that's been fed soy versus meat that's been fed pea protein, you're going to have a different outcome on the other end. So what I like to do is, while the animal, it's a trade-off, while the animal is growing young, I will feed a little bit of soy in that ration to help that growth happen efficiently. As the animal comes to the end, I will wean that out of their diet so that in the curing process, some of those oils offer a much higher chance of rancidness. If your bacon or your fat, especially if the animal is a little bit past prime, once a pig goes past a certain weight, all it's gonna do is put on back fat. That's all it's gonna do. The meat's pretty much past where it's gonna go. It's just gonna get fatter, fatter, fatter. Those oils are gonna reside in that fat, and after you try to cure that, if you have it in the wrong environment, you're gonna have a rancid product. So that's what you really need to watch out for. I will say that for us as humans, we like to be offered the perfect recipe for how to do something, and we have completely divorced ourselves from using our senses, our nose, our fingers, our touch, the smell of something, the touch of something. Like when you cure bacon and you put the salt on, you leave it in the cooler. When you put it in there, it's flippy floppy, very, I don't know the right adjective I had one and I was like, no, that's not it, don't say that. It's very fluid. That salt goes in and pulls that water out of that meat. You will know by the texture of the meat when it is done after a while not based on how long you left it in there. It will change form. It will become much more firm, and you go, ah, yes, it's ready for the smokehouse. The old timers never used smoke as flavor. It was always an agent of preservation. So the cold smoking process, you take your meat out, give it a rinse in some cold, tepid water, let it dry. This is the time of year when I would get super pumped to get that smokehouse rolling, get that bacon smoked, and the first couple times I did not give the meat adequate time to dry. If the outside of your meat is wet, damp, it will absorb different parts of the smoke and make it very bitter and undesirable. So after you pull it out of the cooler, let it sit in the smokehouse for a while. Let it dry. Form a nice pellicle on the outside of the meat. Then when you go to cold smoke it, it will absorb exactly what you need it to. See, her family comes from very highly esteemed, educated architects, very planned out drawings, everything, very fine details. So when I decided to build our Homestead smokehouse, it was raining out. I had a 3010 with my father-in-law's postal digger. I backed it up, wham, 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 and threw 4 postals in the ground, not resembling any sort of real shape at all. It was on the side of a hill. I didn't even level it. I didn't care. I just cut off 4 cedar trees, shoved them in the ground, packed them in tight, built a floor in it, and it is, I don't know what shape it is. But my father-in-law came over to see what I was doing. He's like, what are you doing there? I said, building a smokehouse. I was all excited, you know. I was just getting ready to hang my first bacons and loins and all this stuff in the smokehouse. He's like, what are you doing it like that for? Because it doesn't matter. How the vessel holds the smoke is non-determinative if it's symmetrical. The smoke cares not whether those corners are perfectly flush or not. So don't let it. I used tin and the barn boys off my old grandfather's barn, and it was just, I don't know, it was all me. That was cool about it. So when you build your, does anybody have an on-farm smokehouse? Okay, what's that? Okay, you can use that. I use the method of cold smoking for the agent of preservation. So what I did was I went over to another homesteader's house and he gave me an old cast iron stove. It was nothing special. I dug a pit, I sunk that stove in the ground, I used a stovepipe, and I came up. I had a rise of about maybe 1.5 to 2 feet over the span of maybe 12 feet. I piped it into the bottom of this super awkward, weird oblong structure. I threw some 2x4s up and a place to hang some meat. I left some ventilation on the top so that we didn't create an anaerobic environment while the meat's hanging in there. And I lit that sucker up and we smoked a lot of bacon in there. And it was nothing special. There's a really great video on YouTube. It's something Kentucky. If you type in how to build a smokehouse, that was kind of what I based mine off. There's an old timer on there that talks about the old time practice of salt tables and how to salt the animal and all this type of stuff. Super interesting. I want to kind of give you guys some resources too of things that you can do to get started on this. The practice of the European or Italian even way of preserving this meat is called charcuterie. Have you all heard of charcuterie? Charcuterie boards.
Yes.
It's kind of the new fad amongst the city folk. Oh, I've got a charcuterie board at my party. Cool.
It's fancy crackers and meat.
Yeah. They don't know anything about what charcuterie is, but that's just what they call it. Yeah, the charcuterie cookbook. Obviously, I'm sure most of you have this. The River Cottage Curing and Smoking Handbook. This was a great resource for me. To go through and learn a lot of these salting and curing practices. Don't necessarily need that one right now. Jane Greekson is another great person of charcuterie, French pork cookery. Once you have these things done, I mean, we can talk about particulars on how to do it. You know, you just saw Matt got up there. Was the animal already dispatched when he got it
Yes.
here? Okay.
Yeah, he dispatched it on his farm.
We'll back up to square one for a second. The best way to figure out how to butcher an animal: shoot it, sharpen your knife, and figure it out.
Yep.
I could give you all the particulars, the how-to. Obviously, you know the skin's got to come off. Well, it doesn't have to if you're going to do pork. You can dip it and scrape it. We've done that to a few. Shoot it and figure it out. Invite some people over. Have a day of it. Once you've, gone through the whole production process and you've chosen the grains and all that stuff, have them over. Call me, I'll come over and help. Call Matt, I'm sure he'd come over and help. Invite some people over and get community going. The reason why we were late this morning was because I have invested so much time into our community. If there's one thing I want you to take away from here today, we in the prepper world can have an extremely quick tendency to self-isolate, especially in today's world. I get it. Trust me. I know how bad things are. But I'm here to tell you, if community is not on the forefront of the purpose for which you're doing things, just like this is community, right?
Amen.
Yes, we're all a community of like-minded people,
Okay.
but you will be surprised once you start to do this stuff in your community and showing and talking and having conversations how many other people wish they could do this too. And when you start to include them, that's when the strength of your local community just got stronger and less dependent on the industrial system.
Amen.
Yes, you could do it by yourself. Yes, you could retreat back to the back hill, the back 40, and just get along just fine. But I'm here to tell you that humanity has never been at a more fragile point from a worldwide. I've been in China. I've seen these other civilizations and how they're all hooked. My wife went to Jamaica. She's in the medical profession. They went up on the mountain where the people, they're very poor. They got to grow their own food. They rough it. She went to go treat various chronic diseases, and these people never get to see a doctor, and these people came into her tent to go see, and she's like, gosh, they're all kind of healthy. We didn't really have any problems. 2 days later, she goes down into the city where everything's modernized. They've got fast food, and it was like a bomb went off, and every person that came through the door had chronic disease, like so bad past the point where she couldn't even help most of them. It's like, just because you've got all the cool stuff doesn't mean that you're off the hook. So as much as I'd love to teach you about butchery, I also want to put a huge sense of urgency. Folks, we have got to take our health into our own hands. Men, we have got to reclaim the masculinity that we were created to have. And if we are hooked on industrial food, it will suck us out of us nicely, softly, and unnoticed. I mean, you can see the statistics. The, sperm count and testosterone count right now is down 65% among military males that are coming in compared to the 1960s. Fertility, if we've had one person in our driveway crying over health concerns over fertility, we've had 20 since the time we started doing this. It is a reoccurring theme. Females having fertility issues, males having issues with depression. Folks, it's the food. I've seen it. I've heard the stories of people crying on my shoulder. I don't know what to do. I don't know who to turn to. They're going to come to us. There's plenty of medical professionals in our community that those people could consult. You know who they're going to see? They're going to see farmers that are in touch with what's going on. So,
Put crap in, you get crap out.
what's that?
You put crap in, you get crap out.
That's it. That's it. And I know I've been all over the road today. Covered a lot of stuff. I'd really like to spend a lot of time and kind of hear what obstacles and questions you have to how do I get this to happen on my homestead? What do I do to have bacon hanging in my own kitchen? What questions or obstacles do you guys have to making this happen?
Matt, we've got a new family out here that's just brand new into homesteading. They just dove in head first. They picked up some chickens and some sheep, some goats, a couple of donkeys. And yeah, they're just what advice would you give them as far as how to process this, how to do this without hemorrhaging money?
Yeah. The acquisition of cheap butchery tools. I got the grinder, the gun, restored the press, and bought some American-made knives online, and was still under the $300 mark.
Beautiful.
This can be done very cheaply, primitively, and well. You need not industrial meat grinders to have a wonderful butchery experience on your homestead. These knives, I love them because they say made in USA, don't tread on me, Moan Labe, right there on the handle, baby. It's not a super great high quality knife, but it does hold a good edge. And once you acquire the skill of how to put a great edge on a knife, there's a YouTube video called Carter's Cutlery on YouTube. It's Carter's Cutlery. It's an hour-long video that teaches you how to use a Japanese whetstone. I believe it's they use 1,000 and 6,000 grit on how to put a great handmade edge on a knife, and that's a skill I think every person should have. Yes, you can go to Amazon, get you a $99 work sharp, and have you a mediocre cutting experience. But when the edge is put on there by you, and I'll just tell you, if you're stressed out, go get a piece of crap knife and a whetstone and just get the stress out and sharpen a knife. It doesn't matter if you screw the knife up, it is just a relaxing experience to sit there with a whetstone and listen to the sound of the metal edge come across the top of the stone. It's great. Go get you a $6 knife at Dollar General and just have it out. The other brand of knife I really like is called Old Hickory. They're Canadian made, still a great knife, mediocre metal. You'll have a pretty great cutting experience with them as well. These are the 4 knives I use a lot. So you've got boning knife, carving knife, and 2 different skinning knives. I really like this one for smaller animals up around the joints. I believe these 4 knives cost me 75 bucks. So there you go. In fact, you probably don't need this sheep's knife. If you just got this one and these 2, that's all you need to get her done. As far as, you know, what would you do with those animals? The biggest thing is, it's kind of like when you all first grew your first garden. It's like, oh, look at the turnip crop. Woo! I don't eat turnips though.
True story.
Yeah, we've all been there. We grew a bunch of stuff that we don't know how to eat yet.
Looks cool though.
Yeah, it looks cool. Radishes. Yeah, everybody. You know what radishes are for? Radishes are for your first gardening experience to build confidence. You don't know how to eat them, but man, you can grow them great. And now I have confidence that now I can pour that into other crops. I get it. Totally get it. I've done the same thing. We go overboard trying to have so much happening. Whereas now, after 5 years of doing it, my garden looks much different than it did the first year. So as far as the animal goes, instead of worrying about all the unique styles of cures and all this stuff, whole muscle cookery of braising, frying, smoking, the tougher the meat's gonna be versus tenderness, all your cookery methods have to change. You know, if you're gonna cook a super tense piece of meat that does a lot of action while the animal's in daily route, you're gonna have to take that animal flesh above 194 degrees. 194 is when sort of the soft tendons that hold and bind those tougher pieces of meats together, that's when that dissolves past 194. You got something super tender like a loin, tenderloin, completely different. 118, 122. How many of you have a sous vide? Anybody have a sous vide? It's a new thing that's come out in the cookery world. I believe it started in France. It's and these make great Christmas presents. It comes in a pool of water. It's a stick, and it's got an oscillating fan on it and a programmable. It's ritzy and a probably won't be able to use it for much longer, but while they're amazing. You put your meat in any vessel of any kind. I recommend their actual name brand because I'm not sure how promiscuous the microplastics can be in your regular Ziploc bags. I try to be aware of that. It's not a perfect system, but you program that sous vide to an exact temperature like a steak. Put it at 118, let it sit there for 6 hours, pour some seasoning in it, go away, do something else. You come back, and that is perfectly 118 degrees all the way through. Get your cast iron screaming hot, butter, salt, garlic, throw it down in the butter, flip it over, a few seconds on each side, and you have an amazing steaking experience with very little effort.
Sous vide.
S? Say it louder. Yep, there we go.
Sous vide. Thank you.
Sous vide.
Yes.
Yeah,
Just like it sounds.
just like it sounds. As far as stuffing of casing sausage go, how many of you know what Walton's meat is from Wichita, Kansas? Okay. Next time you go to Wichita, off of K96, the place is called Walton's. This is the home butchery megastore. If you're a man and you have any cash in your pocket, you won't when you leave. When you walk in there and you see a whole aisle of meat grinders and you're like, oh, wow. There's a whole aisle of seasonings just for bratwurst, a whole aisle of seasonings just for sausages. I would encourage you to be super aware of the additives that they do put. These are commercialized seasonings, okay? So if you're super sensitive to MSG, which is monosodium glutamate, it's a taste enhancer. They put it in everything. It has a very promiscuous effect on our hunger hormone ghrelin. It will cause that hormone to be delayed. It will cause you to not feel full and satiated. You will continue to eat in the presence of monosodium glutamate. I wouldn't recommend any seasonings that contain that. Maltodextrin. I mean, these are highly processed sugars that our tongue goes, ooh, I like that. Well, of course you do. It's causing a lot of cellular destruction. I'll just tell you ahead of time, my number one favorite sausage seasoning from Walton's is called Holly, Holly. I make breakfast sausage out of it. Best breakfast sausage I've ever had. My favorite brat seasoning is a combination of the beer brat seasoning, and the other one is Blue Ribbon. We make hundreds and hundreds of pounds of bratwurst at our house. If you're looking for another place to acquire cheap butchery equipment, online is a website called Vevor, V-E-V-O-R. It's all made in China. It's cheap, it's disposable. That's where I bought my electric sausage press. We had an event at our farm called Hymns on the Hill. We started it 3 years ago of how to just be a steward to our community, how to love on people. We decided we were going to donate bratwurst for the deal. We fed everybody bratwurst. We had, my family and I, we brought our instruments. We play in a family bluegrass band, and everybody came out, sat on the side of the hill for an evening together and enjoyed amazing fellowship, great food. And there was a ton of praise and worship that happened that night. And it was a super cool, intimate experience with the people in our community. But I'm kind of one of those like you in the preparedness world. We like to I'll just do it myself. I got it. This year I decided to allocate some of those responsibilities to people in the community. Friday night I said, you know what? We're gonna get a bunch of ground pork and we're gonna hand make all these brats ourselves as a church. And I had 40 people at our house on Friday night. Before the event Saturday night, we cranked out 150 pounds of bratwurst in an hour and a half. And it was super simple, and I was blown away how much fun everybody had getting to get their hands dirty and stand shoulder to shoulder together and embark on something knowing what it was going to do on the other side of it. It was super empowering for everybody else. So I encourage you, open up your farmsteads and your homesteads and have an event for your neighbors and your friends and your community or the football team, and invite them all out and feed them, and have an evening of fellowship at your own expense. It will be worth it. It may take time, but the more people come and see what you're trying to do on your own farms and homes, our world needs this now more than ever. They don't need us to self-isolate, because the time's coming real soon, folks. You can feel it in your bones just like I can. You know what's about to happen. You just feel it. We don't know the time or date, but we know it's coming. That's the only thing all of us can agree on.
Amen.
Yeah. Forgot where I was going with the back half of your question. Whole muscles. Did that help at all? Okay. What else? What else was there?
Don't self-isolate.
Don't self-isolate. I have the tendency to, and you got to work against it. It's very easy to do, to just run for the hills and go, oh, they're a bunch of idiots. They are.
Man, I bet if you ask most of the people here, they'll tell you that they're all introverts. I know a lot of people here, and most of us are introverts. Most of us purposefully will stick our head in the sand and hope that everything's going to be okay, but that's not what we're supposed to do, and that's not why we're here today.
That's right. I encourage you to go out and find some go to like old farm auctions, and you can find these old, Enterprise was a company made back in the 1800s. Enterprise cranked out a bunch of really cool home self-sufficient products like that sausage stuffer. That's an Enterprise. They make all the sizes, so I'm a collector, so I got to collect all the sizes in. Once I got my grandfather's restored, I had to go collect the other sizes that my grandfather didn't have. This is a number 12 meat grinder. I'd encourage you to go to Walton's and get a few sets of plates and knives if you are going to acquire a meat grinder. The plates and knives are kind of your variable, because if stuff goes down, these are kind of hard to come by. Get you a few different sizes plates. You're either probably going to, I actually use this number 22 grinder with a belt pulley on it and an electric motor, and I thought, man, if stuff ever went downhill and the electric part wasn't, I could take one of my kids' bicycle and mount a frame on it and set them down and go, pedal till I tell you to stop. And we're gonna grind some sausage. You can put a horn on here and try to use it as a sausage stuffer. It really doesn't work well. That baby right there will do 18 pounds of sausage pretty quick, and it'll force you to muscle up because it's hard to crank. Mount it down to a table. Walton's also sells all of the casings that you would need to make bratwurst. We started making summer sausage this year. Actually, I brought some of our summer sausage for Bartertown or whatever to trade out. We bought some homemade root beer with us, and anyway, that's that. Anybody else have any more questions to continue the conversation? Yeah, we do grass-fed beef. We took the opportunity at the beginning of the season, knowing that there was a possibility of drought on the horizon, and decided to really scale back some of our production to really give the grass a rest. If you guys do have grassland pasture space and you really aren't concerned with the management and productivity of that pasture space, I really want to encourage you, watch channels like Greg Judy, because our pasture ground right now has never been so run down as what it is this year in our part of the state. I mean, ranchers are having to sell animals by the hundreds because they've pushed their pastures so hard for so long, they have no resilience anymore. So if you have a grass-based system using cows and sheep, you're in trouble. I'm sorry. You just can't afford to buy round bales to get yourself through this drought. It's not going to happen. You have to manage the grass really, really well. So we kind of dialed back the sheep. We sold our sheep when the market was super high. We plan on getting back in with some Katahdin hair sheep. What was the sheep that Matt brought? What kind was that? Katahdin, yeah. My wife, first time we had sheep, we did a leg of lamb. I butchered it out. I had a handsaw. We did some whole muscle stuff. Man, sheep is awesome, especially in a grid down situation. You can't eat a whole cow. It's great when the freezers work, don't get me wrong, and I love my beef. But rabbits, chickens, and sheep are your only way to keeping meat in a sizable way that you can consume it fast enough while being cured before it goes to waste. It's not practical to cure an 800-pound hanging carcass. It's just not. So if you are going to do beef, I would encourage you to go with these smaller sort of pseudo breeds. Right. South Pole, Dexter, what are those really super furry ones? The Highlands, yeah. They're not going to do great on a drought year like this, but they don't get all that big. You're going to have a look at a hanging carcass just above the size of a deer, which is doable. A lot longer. We had Highlands for a while, and man, there's steers 7, 8 years old, and they're hardy. You can feed them, they can live off of toilet bowls and license plates and rocks and sticks and thorns, and it's like, how is that thing still living? Same with Texas Longhorns. I mean, they're a pretty hardy breed too, but anyway. Yeah.
What is you're holding one more time?
This is a Enterprise number 22. 22 is the mid-size meat grinder. I put a belt pulley on this and a variable speed electric motor, and we could grind hundreds of pounds of pork in a short time. I picked up this for $20 on Facebook Marketplace. Bought a fresh set of knives and plates off the Walton's website. Boy, it was beautiful. Make sure your meat's nice and cool when you grind it up. You'll have a great experience. Just keep your knives sharp. That's the biggest thing. Anybody else? Okay. Thank you guys. What a fun experience. Big thanks to Patrick and Joey and the other.
Rest of the gang.
Yeah, very much appreciated. Thank you.
We appreciate you, Matt.
Yep.
Thank you, guys.
Yep.
Matt, where can we find more information about you and your operation?
Yeah, check me out on Facebook. My name's Matt Kleopfer, Kleopfer. Our farm page is called Harmony Hill Farmstead. I post all kinds of crazy videos and content, me and my kids playing music and butchery. Facebook always X's my pictures out when it's something like a dead animal hanging. That apparently wigs out a bunch of West Coast willy-nilly kids that are censoring content, but I don't know. That's where I post the majority of it, and it also crosses over onto Instagram at Harmony Hill Farmstead. So
awesome.
Check me out. I'm down in Fredonia, Kansas. If you're going to do something, you need some extra help, just give me a call. We do stuff like this all the time. I know Matt does, going around helping people out. If you have any questions, just call. I'd love to help you.
Hit him up on his Facebook page. Make sure you guys look him up, give him a like, give him a share.
Thank you, guys.
You bet.
In the pavilion where you find his class graphic is a QR code that will lead directly to his page if you just open your phone's camera and have that set.
Yep, just scan that QR
Cool.
code. It'll take you right there, and you can just hit your like button, guys.
I love it. Thank you.
We appreciate you, man.
Yep.
Even better is bookfinder.com.
Bookfinder and hold on. Okay, you guys are saying good stuff. Okay, wait. Bookfinder.com.